There is a certain discomfort that arises when one begins to study power. Not the loud, theatrical kind displayed in public, but the quiet, calculating force that moves beneath human behavior. It is not the obvious displays of dominance that shape the world most profoundly, but the subtle manipulations, the unspoken hierarchies, and the invisible negotiations that occur in every interaction. This form of power is unsettling precisely because it does not announce itself. It exists in silence, in timing, in restraint. To observe it is to realize that much of what we once believed to be random or emotional is, in fact, structured and deliberate. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this deeply. He did not write to comfort the innocent or to uphold idealistic visions of how people should behave. Instead, he wrote to expose how they actually do behave when stripped of pretense. To him, power was not evil. It was simply real, as natural and unavoidable as gravity. And those who refuse to understand it, who cling to comforting illusions about fairness and goodwill, often become victims of those who do. The discomfort, then, is not just intellectual, it is existential. It is the realization that the world operates by rules that are rarely spoken, but always enforced. The first law is simple, yet deeply unsettling: never outshine the master. At its core lies an understanding of human ego, which is far more fragile than it appears, even among those who project confidence and authority. People in positions of power often derive their identity not just from their competence, but from their perceived superiority over others. When you inadvertently expose their limitations by being too brilliant, too efficient, or too insightful, you threaten that identity. And when identity is threatened, the response is rarely rational. It becomes emotional, defensive, and in many cases, retaliatory. The danger is not always immediate or visible. It may come in the form of subtle exclusion, withheld opportunities, or quiet sabotage. The wise, therefore, learn the art of strategic humility. They do not diminish their capabilities, but they regulate their display of them. They allow those above them to feel secure, even admired, while quietly maintaining their own competence and influence. This is not deception for its own sake, it is survival within systems governed by perception. True intelligence, in this sense, is not just about what you know, it is about knowing when and how to reveal it. The second law challenges one of the most deeply ingrained human instincts. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. Friendship is often idealized as a space of loyalty and mutual support. Yet it is precisely this emotional closeness that makes it volatile. Friends carry expectations of reciprocity, of recognition, of alignment. And when those expectations are unmet, disappointment can turn into resentment. Familiarity can breed not only comfort but also envy, competition, and a sense of entitlement. Betrayal, when it comes from a friend, cuts deeper because it is layered with history and emotion. Enemies, by contrast, operate on a different plane. Their intentions are rarely hidden, their opposition is clear and therefore predictable. This clarity allows for strategy. When an enemy is converted, through negotiation, shared interest, or mutual benefit, their loyalty can become surprisingly strong, precisely because it is chosen rather than assumed. They have already seen the conflict and moved beyond it. The law does not suggest abandoning friendship, but rather understanding its limitations. It calls for a sober recognition that trust must be measured, and that alliances built on clarity can sometimes be more stable than those built on emotion. The third law teaches concealment. Hide your intentions. In a world that often praises transparency and openness as moral virtues, this idea can feel counterintuitive, even unsettling. Yet from a strategic perspective, revealing your full intentions places you at a disadvantage. When others know your goals, they gain the ability to interfere, to anticipate your moves, and to position themselves in opposition. Human nature is such that people resist being outmaneuvered, especially when they can see it coming. Concealment, therefore, is not about dishonesty. It is about preserving the integrity of your path. The invincible individual understands that communication can operate on multiple levels. They speak truth, but not the whole truth. They reveal direction, but not the destination. This layered communication creates space for movement, for adjustment, and for protection. It also generates a subtle form of psychological power, mystery. When people cannot fully read you, they are forced to observe more carefully, to second-guess their assumptions, and to approach you with caution. In this way, concealment becomes not just a defensive tool, but an active strategy for maintaining control in an unpredictable environment. The fourth law states, always say less than necessary. In a culture that often equates verbosity with confidence and constant expression with authenticity, silence can be misunderstood as weakness. Yet silence, when used deliberately, is one of the most powerful forms of communication. Words, once spoken, cannot be taken back. They reveal more than we intend. Our insecurities, our desires, our plans, and sometimes even our contradictions. The more we speak, the more material we provide for others to analyze, interpret, and potentially use against us. Restraint, therefore, is not about withholding for the sake of secrecy, but about maintaining control over what is known and what remains hidden. Silence creates space, and in that space others project their own assumptions. It generates intrigue, authority, and a sense of depth. People tend to assign greater weight to those who speak less, interpreting their words as more deliberate and meaningful. The invincible individual understands this dynamic and uses it to their advantage. They choose their words carefully, not out of fear, but out of precision. In doing so, they ensure that when they do speak, their voice carries impact rather than noise. The fifth law is about reputation. Guard it with your life. Reputation is an invisible yet immensely powerful force that precedes you into every room, every conversation, and every opportunity. It shapes how others perceive you before you have the chance to define yourself. In many ways, it acts as a form of social currency, influencing trust, respect, and access. A strong reputation can open doors effortlessly, while a damaged one can close them just as quickly, often without explanation. What makes reputation particularly complex is that it is not entirely within your control. It exists in the minds of others, shaped by their interpretations, biases, and experiences. This is why it must be managed with care and intention. The powerful understand that perception often matters more than reality. They are deliberate in how they present themselves, consistent in their actions, and vigilant in protecting their image from unnecessary damage. Once a reputation is compromised, rebuilding it requires time, effort, and often a level of humility that many are unwilling to endure. To guard one's reputation, therefore, is not an act of vanity. It is an act of strategic preservation, ensuring that one's influence remains intact over time. The seventh law reminds us, get others to do the work, but take the credit. This law is often misunderstood as a prescription for laziness or exploitation, but its essence lies in the art of leverage and orchestration. True power is rarely measured by effort alone. It is measured by outcomes and influence. Those who achieve remarkable results often do so not by doing everything themselves, but by creating systems in which others operate effectively under their guidance. The invincible individual understands human nature. People desire recognition, and when channeled correctly, their energy can produce immense results. By directing this energy strategically, one amplifies their own influence without exhausting personal resources. This requires a delicate balance of motivation, delegation, and subtle management. The key is to ensure that the contributions of others are acknowledged enough to maintain morale, while the overarching vision remains associated with your leadership. In this way, you cultivate loyalty and diligence, while simultaneously enhancing your own reputation and power. Mastery of this law transforms ordinary collaboration into a force multiplier, making the seemingly impossible appear effortless and further solidifying your invincibility in social and organizational structures. The eighth law: make others come to you. There is a fundamental principle in power dynamics. He who chases loses control. When you pursue someone, you operate on their terms, responding to their timing, their environment, and their conditions. This creates vulnerability because you surrender initiative. By contrast, when others are drawn to you, they enter your space, follow your rules, and engage on terms that favor you. This is the essence of strategic patience. It is not passive waiting, but an active cultivation of conditions that make your presence, knowledge, or influence desirable. People are naturally drawn to those who appear composed, confident, and in command of their own resources. The invincible individual understands that scarcity, exclusivity, and subtle allure amplify appeal. By positioning oneself as a center of value, whether through expertise, charisma, or resources, others willingly move toward you. Power, in this sense, is not aggression, it is gravitational. You create a field of influence so compelling that people's choices align with your objectives without overt coercion. This law, when mastered, flips the dynamic of dependency and makes others subordinate to your terms without force. The ninth law reveals a subtle truth: win through actions, never through argument. Words are seductive, but they are also easily resisted. When people are presented with logic or rhetoric, they often react defensively, their egos rejecting ideas that threaten their sense of self. Arguments can escalate conflict, entrench opposition, and produce outcomes opposite to those intended. Action, however, speaks with undeniable authority. Results are tangible, they cannot be easily disputed or ignored. The invincible individual prioritizes demonstration over debate. By showing capability, delivering outcomes, and manifesting intent, they bypass resistance and silence critics. This principle extends beyond mere results. It encompasses the power of example. Others, observing consistent competence and decisive action, are compelled to follow, respect, or yield. Words may inspire, but actions command. Mastery of this law transforms patience, diligence, and competence into instruments of influence. It creates a reputation of inevitability. When you act, the world moves in response, and resistance diminishes because reality itself validates your power. The 10th law warns: avoid the unhappy and unlucky. Emotions and attitudes are contagious, shaping the environment in ways that are often subtle but powerful. Those consumed by misfortune, resentment, or despair project a gravity that can pull even the strongest into their orbit. It is not necessarily about judgment or cruelty. Rather, it is a matter of self-preservation. Invincibility demands careful management of proximity. Surrounding oneself with energy that is constructive, disciplined, and optimistic enhances one's own resilience, while negative influences erode stability, confidence, and decision-making. The wise are discerning in their social investments, recognizing that influence flows both ways. The unlucky, even when talented, often lack discipline, foresight, or consistency, the very qualities that underpin control and invulnerability. By selectively engaging with environments and individuals that reinforce rather than undermine strength, the powerful maintain clarity of purpose. This law emphasizes that power is as much about what you avoid as what you pursue. Guarding against toxic influence is not isolation. It is strategic curation of the forces that shape your reality. The 11th law: learn to keep people dependent on you. Independence is often celebrated as a virtue, but in the realm of influence, it diminishes control. Those who rely on others for resources, guidance, knowledge, or opportunity are beholden to the providers of those necessities. By cultivating indispensability, one creates stability and security within their sphere of influence. Dependence can take many forms: financial, intellectual, social, or strategic, but the principle remains consistent. When people cannot function without you, you hold a central position of authority. This does not require coercion, it requires value creation. The invincible individual identifies needs, solves problems, and positions themselves as the essential link in a network. By doing so, they shift relationships from negotiation to reliance. Those who are indispensable rarely face sudden opposition, because their absence would create immediate dysfunction. Mastery of this law is subtle yet profound. It transforms relationships from transactional to hierarchical, embedding power into the very fabric of human interaction and ensuring that influence endures even amidst change. The 12th law introduces calculated honesty. Use selective honesty and generosity to disarm. Trust is a fragile commodity, and when wielded deliberately, it becomes a weapon as potent as any force. People naturally resist deception, but they are disarmed by apparent transparency or benevolence. By revealing truth selectively, the powerful build credibility while concealing vulnerabilities. Generosity, when used strategically, cultivates gratitude, loyalty, and psychological obligation. This is not manipulation for its own sake. It is the careful balancing of influence and perception. The invincible individual knows that an act of sincerity, given at the right moment, can open doors, neutralize suspicion, and shape alliances. It is a subtle form of leverage. By appearing forthcoming, one gains information, cooperation, and goodwill, all of which strengthen one's position without confrontation. Strategic honesty and generosity are therefore tools of both influence and protection, reinforcing authority while minimizing resistance, and ensuring that relationships, personal, professional, or political, remain pliable yet stable. The 13th law, when asking for help, appealed to self-interest. Human behavior is rarely driven purely by altruism. While moral narratives celebrate generosity and empathy, real influence relies on understanding what motivates people at their core. People respond to what benefits them, whether it is status, wealth, security, or recognition. To secure assistance, one must frame requests in a way that aligns the other party's gain with one's own objectives. This is not about deceit, but about clarity and strategy, showing how collaboration or support produces tangible advantages for those involved. The invincible individual understands the psychology of reciprocity and reward. By demonstrating that cooperation is mutually beneficial, they reduce resistance and foster commitment. The request is not perceived as a favor imposed, but as an opportunity embraced. Mastery of this law requires empathy calibrated with strategy. One must understand the desires, fears, and priorities of others, then craft appeals that resonate with their self-interest. In doing so, influence is exercised smoothly, relationships are strengthened, and outcomes are achieved with minimal friction. The 14th law, pose as a friend, work as a spy. Observation is a form of power that transcends overt action. To understand others without being fully understood yourself is to hold an invisible advantage. By cultivating trust and rapport, the invincible individual gains access to insights, intentions, and dynamics that remain hidden from most. This is not mere eavesdropping. It is subtle intelligence gathering, executed with social finesse. Information, when collected strategically, is more powerful than force because it allows for anticipation and preparation. Those who underestimate the value of observation often act reactively, blindsided by unseen forces. The master of this law engages fully in social environments, offering friendship and cooperation while silently monitoring the landscape. Through careful attention to patterns, speech, and behavior, They accumulate a map of influence, motivation, and opportunity. Knowledge becomes leverage, and leverage becomes authority. In a world driven by hidden agendas and unspoken hierarchies, the ability to see without being seen is an invincible skill, ensuring that action is always informed and advantage is consistently maintained. The 15th law: crush your enemy totally. Half measures in conflict are dangerous. They invite revenge, prolong instability, and leave threats simmering beneath the surface. When confrontation becomes unavoidable, decisiveness is essential. The goal is not simply victory, but the elimination of future threats. This law is harsh, yet pragmatic. It recognizes that unresolved conflicts are seeds of ongoing danger. Power, when exercised partially or hesitantly, can signal weakness, embolden rivals, and destabilize one's position. By acting decisively, the invincible individual establishes clear boundaries and communicates unambiguous consequences. Importantly, this does not necessitate cruelty for its own sake. It is strategy informed by foresight. Complete resolution prevents lingering resentment and removes uncertainty from the equation. Those who mastered this principle combine courage with calculation, ensuring that conflict serves long-term security rather than transient emotion. In essence, the law underscores the necessity of clarity, finality, and unrelenting resolve in the maintenance of power and safety. Yet beneath all these laws lies a deeper philosophical truth. Power is not merely external, it is internal. To master others, one must first master oneself. Fear, impulse, ego, and desire. Without self-discipline, knowledge of human nature, and emotional intelligence, these laws become tools in unsteady hands, capable of harming both wielder and target. True invincibility is rooted in psychological mastery, the ability to remain composed under pressure, to anticipate reactions, and to regulate one's own motivations and responses. It is a constant practice, a lifelong engagement with self-awareness. By mastering internal power, one creates a stable foundation from which all external strategies can be executed effectively. The strongest individuals do not rely on intimidation, manipulation, or brute force alone. They harness the quiet strength that comes from clarity, patience, and control. In this sense, the internal cultivation of power is both preventative and generative, ensuring that every law is applied with precision, purpose, and ethical consideration. In the end, what Machiavelli reveals is not a path for cruelty, domination, or unbridled ambition. It is a mirror of reality, a guide to navigating human nature as it truly exists. To become dangerously invincible is not to exercise authority blindly, but to observe with precision, anticipate with foresight, and act with discernment. It is the ability to remain unshaken amidst chaos, to influence subtly yet effectively, and to remain strategically invisible while orchestrating outcomes. This invincibility comes not from arrogance, but from awareness, a profound understanding of the hidden rules that govern behavior, motivation, and consequence. Those who study these laws gain insight into both themselves and others, learning to navigate complex social landscapes with sophistication. The goal is not to dominate blindly, but to maintain equilibrium, maximize influence, and avoid the pitfalls that come from naivety or ignorance. Awareness, in this context, is the cornerstone of true power. Once you see clearly, once you understand the mechanics that shape human interactions, you are no longer naive. You become aware, and awareness is more than knowledge. It is preparedness, prudence, and psychological resilience. With this clarity, every decision, every word, and every action is informed by strategy rather than impulse. You can recognize manipulation, anticipate conflict, and choose alliances with discernment. Power then ceases to be abstract or threatening. It becomes navigable. The invincible individual operates with both subtlety and authority, shaping reality without unnecessary friction. Machiavelli's laws, when understood deeply, cultivate not just control over others, but mastery over oneself. They teach that true invincibility is not about fear or domination. It is about perception, patience, and an unflinching understanding of human nature. To see the world as it is, and to act within that knowledge, is to hold a power that is simultaneously quiet, potent, and enduring, rendering one truly, dangerously invincible. Thank you for watching.